The house on Maple End had stood for over 60 years. A tired two-story with faded blue paint, a sagging porch, and a chimney that leaned just slightly, as though whispering secrets to the wind. For the Morgan family, it was more than a house. It was memory, burden, and lately a question mark. Claire Morgan hadn't planned to stay longer than the funeral. She had left Boston with 1 suitcase and 2 weeks off work, expecting to handle her father's affairs quickly. But now, 3 weeks later, she was still here. The air in the house was thick with silence and the scent of old pipe smoke, as if her father had only just stepped out to the garden. Her mother, Elaine, moved slowly through the kitchen that morning, boiling water for tea with the same battered kettle they'd had since Claire was a teenager. At the table, her younger brother Danny scrolled through job listings on his phone with a deep, silent frustration. No one had said anything yet about the house, but everyone knew. They couldn't afford to keep it. It wasn't just the bills, though those alone were crushing. It was the leaky roof, the back taxes, the old plumbing, the broken furnace, and the half-finished repairs their father had left behind when his heart finally gave out in early October. There was no life insurance.
No savings.
Only debts. And the house. "I'm calling the realtor tomorrow," Elaine said quietly, placing 2 mugs on the table. "We'll list it." Claire looked up. "You're sure?" "No," her mother replied, sitting across from her. "But we have to. I can't keep this place on my own." Danny leaned back in his chair. "Where would you go?" Elaine shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "I might ask Lydia if I can stay for a bit, or find something small." "Doesn't matter." "It does matter," Claire said. "This is your home." "It's just a house," Elaine said softly. "Your father's not in these walls." Claire said nothing. She knew her mother was right, but it didn't feel like just a house. It was where she and Danny had learned to ride bikes, where they'd fought and made up 1,000 times, where birthdays and holidays and late-night talks had happened. It was filled with layers of time, and of him. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Claire wandered the house. She moved through the dark hallway, past peeling wallpaper and tilted picture frames, and into the study, her father's favorite room. His old recliner was still there, empty now, a blanket folded over the back, and a pair of reading glasses left on the side table, as if he might return at any moment. She sat down slowly, letting the silence wrap around her like a memory. On a whim, she pulled open the bottom drawer of his desk. Mostly junk. Old receipts, inkless pens, yellowed paper. But something at the very back caught her eye, a folded piece of parchment tucked behind the drawer lining. Carefully, she pulled it free. The paper was aged, creased in thirds, and her father's handwriting filled the front in bold, deliberate strokes. "To my children, if you ever find this." Her breath caught. She glanced toward the hallway, then unfolded the rest. "To my children, if you're reading this, then I suppose I've finally lost the race against time. There's so much I wanted to tell you while I was still here. About the house, about our family, about choices I made when I was young. But I kept waiting for the right moment. And like most fools who wait, I ran out of moments. This house, it doesn't just belong to us. Carries weight, history, promises I once made to someone I loved. There's something in the attic. A box. Look behind the third beam next to the chimney. It'll explain more than I ever managed to. I'm sorry I wasn't always honest. And I'm sorry for the burdens I've left behind. But I hope, more than anything, that you'll understand. With all my love, Dad." Claire read it twice. Her fingers trembled slightly. A box in the attic? What could be so important that he'd hide it and only mention it after he was gone? She stared at the letter. The ink faded in places, but the message clear. Her father had kept a secret, one big enough to hide in the bones of the house. Slowly, she stood, her heart pounding louder than the creaking floorboards beneath her. She took the flashlight from the hallway closet and headed for the attic. The past was waiting upstairs. Part 2. Dust and Shadows. The attic was colder than Claire remembered. Dust clung to every surface, thick as frost. The single light bulb dangling from the ceiling flickered as she pulled the chain, casting pale, uncertain light across boxes labeled Christmas. Old tools. and Danny's school stuff. But her eyes moved past all of it. She was looking for something hidden. "Third beam next to the chimney," she whispered, recalling the letter. The attic stretched above the second floor like a forgotten world. She walked carefully, avoiding loose boards, the flashlight shaking in her hand. Her breath formed faint clouds in the cold. She counted the beams. 1, 2, 3. Next to the third beam, the insulation had been peeled back. Someone had once pried into the wall. Claire set the flashlight between her teeth, knelt, and ran her hands along the exposed wood. Something shifted under her fingers. A loose panel. She tugged gently. It came free with a groan. Behind it was a small wooden box. It was about the size of a shoebox, wrapped in a cracked leather strap and sealed with a rusted clasp. She sat back on her heels, staring. Her father hadn't been a man of drama. If he'd hidden this, it meant something. Claire opened the box. Inside were photographs, black and white at first, then color, faded snapshots of people she didn't recognize. A woman with dark hair and a strong jawline. A child, maybe 5 years old, laughing beside a fence. There was a bundle of letters, tied in red ribbon, and at the bottom, a birth certificate. She pulled it free. Name: Samuel James Morgan. Mother: Evelyn Hart. Father: Thomas Morgan. Thomas Morgan, her father. Claire's stomach dropped. Who was Samuel? She flipped through the photos again. There was one of her father, younger by at least 30 years, standing beside the same woman with the dark hair. Evelyn Hart. He looked happy. His arm around her shoulder, the child between them. Claire's pulse pounded. Her father had a child before them. A half-brother she had never known. Back downstairs, Claire sat alone in the kitchen, the box in front of her, the letter beside it. She didn't wake her mother or brother. Not yet. Not until she understood. The letters were dated between 1977 and 1982. She opened the first one. Tom, I waited for you again last night. Samuel asked where his daddy was. I didn't have an answer. He misses you. I miss you. I know you said things would be different, but it's been months. If you're not coming back, I need to know. Please don't leave us in silence. Evelyn. Some were angrier, some heartbreakingly soft. The last was from 1982. It was short. He's 10 now. You've missed it all. We're moving. Don't write anymore. Claire rubbed her eyes. Her father had walked away from a woman, from a child, from a life. He'd built a new family and never said a word. And now, decades later, she was holding the evidence in her hands. The next morning, she confronted her mother. Elaine stood by the window sipping tea. When Claire placed the letter and the birth certificate on the table, she didn't move. I found them in the attic, Claire said softly. Elaine stared out the window. I always wondered if you would. You knew. Not everything. Elaine turned. Her face was pale but calm. I met your father in '84. He never talked much about the years before. But one night when we were first married, I found a letter. He said it was a mistake, something he'd fixed by walking away. I asked if he had a child. He didn't answer. Claire sat down. Why didn't you ever say anything? I thought. Maybe he was ashamed. Maybe he thought he didn't deserve forgiveness. And maybe I didn't want to ruin what we had. Her voice wavered. But I always had this feeling. That part of him never came with us into this house. Danny appeared in the doorway, bleary-eyed. What's going on? Claire handed him the photos. We have a brother. He stared. What? A half-brother, she clarified. Our dad had another family before us. Danny dropped into a chair, flipping through the photos. Jesus. Did he ever talk to him again? I don't think so. I don't even know if he knew where they went. There was a long silence. Danny finally looked up. So what now? Claire didn't answer. She looked at the picture again. The boy laughing in the field, maybe 5 years old, full of life. I don't know where he is, she said. But I'm going to find him. Part 3, Tracing a Ghost. 2 days later, Claire sat in the public library downtown, surrounded by yellowed newspaper clippings, a half-drunk coffee, and the quiet hum of old radiators. Her laptop screen showed dozens of tabs, genealogy sites, birth records, social media profiles, obituary archives. The name Samuel James Morgan floated on every page, but nothing concrete came up. No one by that name born in 1972 with Mother Evelyn Hart seemed to exist, not in any public way. Frustrated, she rubbed her eyes. If Samuel had changed his name, or if Evelyn had remarried and given him a different last name, it would make the search even harder. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she had an idea. She went back to the letter, the last one. "We're moving," Evelyn had written. No city, no address, no clue where. But earlier letters mentioned a town. Claiborne, about 50 miles north. Claire grabbed her coat and drove there. Claiborne was small. One main street, 2 diners, a post office, and a few sleepy neighborhoods framed by woods. She visited the town records office and spent an hour digging through physical files, marriage licenses, address changes, tax filings. When she was about to give up, she found it. Evelyn Hart, married in 1983 to Gregory P. Lawson. New name, Evelyn Lawson. Her heart quickened. She flipped to property records. Lawson, Evelyn P. and Gregory P. 1984 purchase, 72 Willow Creek Road. Claire copied the address, drove out immediately. The house was modest, white siding, a blue front door, flower boxes on the windows. She parked across the street and just sat there. The yard was empty, the windows still. Her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. What if she knocked and someone answered? What if it was Samuel? What would she even say? She didn't go up to the door that day. Instead, she drove back home, her mind racing. That evening, she sat with Danny in their father's old study, the letterbox between them. "He lived in that house," she said quietly. "Or maybe still does. I didn't knock." "Why not?" "Because I don't know what I want from him," she admitted. "Closure? Connection? He might not even know about us." Danny leaned back, folding his arms. "If the roles were reversed, wouldn't you want to know?" Claire exhaled. "I don't want to bring pain into someone else's life." Danny picked up the photograph of their father with Evelyn and Samuel. "Maybe he already carries the pain. Maybe this fills in the part he's been missing." Claire nodded slowly. "Maybe." The next day she went back. She stood on the porch at 72 Willow Creek Road, hand poised to knock. The door opened before she could. A man stood there, early 50s, tall, salt and pepper hair, and eyes so familiar they made her breath catch. Her father's eyes. "Yes?" he asked politely. Claire opened her mouth, but the words stuck. I'm sorry," she said finally. "This is going to sound insane, but are you Samuel James Morgan?" The man's face didn't change.
I'm Claire Morgan.
"I think I might be your half-sister." A long silence followed. Then, softly, he said, "You'd better come in." The inside of the house smelled like coffee and pine wood. A dog barked faintly from the back room. Samuel, he had introduced himself with hesitation, led her into the kitchen, where a woman in her late 40s stood frozen, holding a mug. She looked at Claire, confused. "This is Claire," Samuel said. "She says she's my sister." The woman blinked. "Oh, I didn't know," Samuel added quickly, almost defensively. "I swear, I didn't know." Claire sat across from them. "I found a letter from our father, hidden in the attic after he died." Samuel looked down. "I never heard from him again, not after we moved here. My mom said he chose to forget us." Claire hesitated. "He didn't forget you. He just didn't know how to come back." Samuel nodded slowly, eyes distant. "That sounds like him." They sat in silence for a moment. "Do you hate him?" Claire finally asked. He thought for a long time. "I did, for a while. But I had a good life. My stepdad was kind. Mom was strong. I just always wondered why I wasn't enough." Claire swallowed the lump in her throat. "He kept your photos," she said. "Letters. Everything. He never told us. I don't know if it was guilt or shame or fear, but he left a message. For both of us. She handed him a copy of the letter from the attic. Samuel read it in silence. When he finished, his hands shook slightly. She remembered climbing this tree as a child. Remembered her father holding out his arms, ready to catch her if she slipped, though she never did. He'd always joked that she had her mother's stubborn balance. And yet, in the ways that mattered, she'd had his silence too. Now, for the first time, she felt like she understood him. Not entirely, but enough to forgive. The family decided to delay the sale. Danny picked up part-time work at the local hardware store. Elaine started sorting through boxes in the basement. Not with the sadness of letting go, but with the curiosity of rediscovering. Claire used her vacation days to extend her stay, unsure when or if she'd go back to Boston. One night, they all sat on the back porch, wrapped in sweaters, sipping wine as the wind rustled the trees. "Do you think Dad knew we'd find it?" Danny asked suddenly. "The box," Claire said. "Yeah, the letter. All of it. Do you think he meant for us to really find it?" Elaine stared into her glass. "Your father was a complicated man. He spent his life fixing things that were broken: cars, engines, wiring. But he never figured out how to fix the past. Maybe leaving that letter was his way of trying." Danny nodded slowly. Claire looked up at the stars. "Maybe he knew this house was the only way we'd ever find the truth." Elaine's eyes glistened. "Then maybe it's not time to leave it yet." A week later, a letter arrived in the mailbox. It was addressed to Claire Morgan, return address, Samuel Lawson. Inside was a photo, a recent one, of Samuel standing beside a young woman with dark curls and bright eyes. "Lily." The note attached was brief. "Thought you might want to see the other half of the story. Let's write the next part together when you're ready. Your brother, Sam." Claire stared at the photo, her throat tightening. She placed it next to the oldest one from the attic, the boy in the field, laughing. It felt like 2 pages of the same book, finally reunited. Part 5. Foundations rebuilt. Winter came early to Maple End. The first frost painted the windows before Halloween, and Claire woke one morning to find the backyard blanketed in white. Snow sat gently on the bare branches of the maple tree, quieting everything beneath. It made the house feel smaller, warmer, like it was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. In the weeks since Samuel's letter arrived, Claire and he had spoken 4 times by phone. The conversations were awkward at first, hesitant, careful, but there was laughter, too. Stories. Shared memories of a man they had known in different ways. What surprised her most wasn't what Samuel remembered, but what he didn't. He had no recollection of their father's voice. Couldn't remember the smell of his jacket or how he drank his coffee. Claire, on the other hand, remembered all of it. It made her realize that what she had taken for granted all those years, the safety, the presence, even the silence, had been a gift Samuel never got to open. Elaine was changing too. Something had softened in her. She smiled more, cleaned less, spent afternoons reading instead of dusting. One day, she even found the courage to go through her late husband's old tool shed. Claire helped her carry out boxes of rusted screwdrivers, cracked paint cans, and dusty jars of screws. At the very back of the shed, they discovered an unopened tin box. Inside were old cassette tapes, labeled in her father's neat block letters. For Elaine, 1985. Claire, your first steps. Danny, baseball, age 6. Elaine covered her mouth. I didn't know these existed. They brought an old tape player from the attic and spent that evening listening to ghosts. Laughter echoed through the living room, Claire's high-pitched giggle, Danny yelling as a bat cracked against a ball, their father's low voice reading bedtime stories. Elaine cried openly, unashamed. It's like he left pieces of himself everywhere, she said. We just never looked deep enough. Later that week, Claire called Samuel again. We found tapes, she said. He recorded everything. Samuel was quiet on the line. He never sent me anything. Claire closed her eyes. Maybe he thought he couldn't. Or maybe he was waiting for the right moment and never found it. I think he was afraid, Samuel said. Of what? Of being forgiven. They sat in silence for a few seconds. Then Claire said, "You should come to the house. Just once. Not for him, for us." Samuel hesitated. "Let me think about it." 3 days later, he came. He drove up alone, stepped out of the car in a dark coat, holding a small suitcase. He looked different in person, taller, grayer, but his eyes were unmistakably Morgan. Danny greeted him on the porch with a firm handshake. Claire hugged him without asking permission. Elaine, quiet and trembling, simply said, "Welcome home." Samuel looked around. "Feels strange, like stepping into a life that could have been mine." Claire smiled gently. "Now it can be. In a way." They spent the evening in the living room, by the fireplace. Claire showed him the attic box, the photographs. Elaine served her late husband's favorite stew. Danny made jokes that didn't quite land, but no one minded. It was quiet, not perfect, but real. That night, when the others had gone to bed, Claire and Samuel sat together in the old study. "Do you hate him?" she asked again, softly. Samuel shook his head. "Not anymore." Claire leaned back. "Me neither." They didn't speak for a while. Finally, he said, "Thank you for finding me." "You were never really lost," Claire replied. "Just waiting to be found." Part 6. The House We Inherit. Snow melted slowly in the corners of the yard, clinging to the shadows where the sun dared not reach. February came soft and pale, with gray skies and quiet mornings. Inside the house on Maple End, time seemed to stretch. Not still, but slower, more deliberate, like the final notes of a familiar song. Samuel stayed for a week. He slept in the guest room that had once belonged to Danny, now cleared of old posters and sports trophies. Every day he rose early, drank coffee in silence, and walked the perimeter of the backyard like someone relearning a language he'd forgotten. Claire watched him from the window, wondering what parts of this place felt like echoes to him, and which felt like ghosts. On the third night, they built a fire and listened to more of the cassette tapes. One in particular silenced the room. Her father's voice, clear, close, speaking directly to no one, yet somehow to all of them. "If you're hearing this, I guess I didn't find the courage to say it in person. Funny thing about being a father, you think the hard part is showing up, but sometimes the hardest part is staying. I didn't stay the first time. I let fear win. I told myself I couldn't be in two places at once. But the truth is, I didn't try hard enough to be in either." Samuel sat still, unmoving. "To the son I left behind, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. But I hope someday, somehow you find peace. And to the children I raised, Claire, Danny, I hope I was better the second time." The tape clicked off. No one spoke for a long time. Then Elaine, quiet and tearful, reached over and took Samuel's hand. He didn't pull away. The next day, the family stood at the edge of town cemetery, bundled in coats, facing the simple headstone of Thomas Morgan. The snow crunched underfoot as wind whispered through the bare trees. Samuel brought no flowers, just a folded note he placed beside the stone. He didn't read it aloud. Claire didn't ask what it said. Some things are meant only for the dead. Afterward, they returned home and gathered in the kitchen. The conversation turned, as it often did, from memory to laughter. Danny brought out a photo album Claire had never seen before. Inside were snapshots of birthdays, camping trips, awkward teenage smiles. "Dad had a mullet?" Samuel asked, incredulous. Elaine laughed. "For almost 2 years. I begged him to cut it. He told me it made him look like a rock star," Danny added. Claire shook her head, smiling. "He looked like a hockey villain." Even Samuel laughed, his first unguarded laugh since he arrived. It felt like stitching something back together. Not perfectly, but firmly. On Samuel's final day in town, the family stood outside as he packed his car. Snowflakes floated down slowly, melting as they landed. "Are you sure you don't want to stay longer?" Elaine asked, hugging him tightly. "I'm sure," he said, "but I'll be back." "You better," Danny said, smiling. "I'm planning on losing to you in poker next time." Claire stepped forward last. "You know," she said softly, "you're part of us now. This isn't temporary." He looked at her, eyes full of something old and raw. I know. I don't want it to be. She hugged him again, tighter this time. Then he got in the car and drove away, his silhouette vanishing down the winding road, the house standing still behind them, watching. Spring came late that year. The first green buds appeared in early April, small and stubborn against the cold. Claire had stayed longer than she'd planned, long enough for her boss in Boston to stop asking when she was coming back. She had begun working remotely, unsure if she would ever fully return. One morning, she sat on the front porch sipping tea, watching the street come alive with color. A robin nested in the maple tree. The wind no longer howled through broken windows. Danny had repaired them himself. The porch steps had been fixed too. The whole house felt steadier now, like it had been waiting for them to come home. Elaine joined her, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "He wrote me letters," she said suddenly. Claire turned. "Your father," Elaine continued, "after Samuel left. Letters he never mailed. I found them in a drawer last week." "What did they say?" Elaine smiled faintly. "That he thought about Evelyn every day, that he wanted to go back to try again, but he was too afraid she wouldn't let him. And then there was me, you, Danny." Life moved forward, but he never let go of that first chapter. Claire nodded, heart aching and full at once. "He was flawed," she said. "We all are," Elaine replied. "But he tried, in the only ways he knew how." They sat together in silence. That afternoon, Claire stood in the attic one last time. The insulation had been patched, the floorboards repaired, but the third beam remained slightly darker than the others, a reminder of what had been hidden there. She didn't feel haunted anymore. She felt whole. Before leaving, she placed a new box in the space where the old one had been. Inside were the letters, the photos, and a note she wrote herself. "To whoever finds this house holds more than dust and wood. It holds truth and grief and forgiveness. It holds family, the kind that fractures and finds its way back again. If you're here, reading this, I hope you remember, not all broken things need to be thrown away. Some just need time." Downstairs, Claire joined her family in the kitchen as the evening sun filtered through the windows, casting golden light on the walls. The house on Maple End was no longer a burden, nor a secret keeper. It was at last a home. The end.